Alright people, so welcome to Jumbo IS and welcome to our lecture series on current affairs. Now today we are going to cover all the important current affairs from the past 1 week with respect to the topic of international relations. So all the important 1 week's current affairs related to international relations shall be covered in today's lecture. Now let me tell this to you in advance. Well, we are covering current affairs subject-wise because this way it will be easier for you to integrate these current affairs with your static portion. Therefore, this lecture series will be really useful for you. But for that, you need to be consistent and regular with this lecture series. Do that till your exams and you don't have to worry about your current affairs portion at all. And you don't have to worry about integrating that current affairs with your static portion because these days questions are asked in a mixed fashion. Static knowledge is also required and current affairs knowledge is also required. Hence, we have changed the strategy of our current affairs. We are covering them subject-wise. And in one lecture, we cover one subject's current affairs of 1 week. Okay? All right then. Without further ado, without further delay, let's straight away dive into the lecture. So let's begin. So current affairs IR June part 4. And here are the topics that we need to cover. So first of all, we are going to talk about the operationalization of a landmark agreement between India and Russia known as the RELOS Pact. Now, this RELOS Pact is a logistics agreement between the two sides. Very important. So we'll talk about this. Then, you all know that USA and Iran have reached a preliminary peace accord. There are many people who are doubting the longevity of this peace accord, but well, nonetheless, there is some peace in this area. So we'll talk about the details of this accord. Then next, as you all know that India has the chairmanship of BRICS for 2026. Therefore, a host of meetings are happening, right? We talked about Agricultural Minister Summit. And now, well, heads of space agencies have met. So all the space agencies of BRICS nations have met in Bengaluru. So we'll talk about this. And in the end, we'll talk about Food and Agricultural Organization's SOFIA report. Now, this is related to the state of fisheries in the world and how India is becoming a dominant fisheries power. So we'll talk about this news item as well. So these are the 4 news items that we shall zero in our attention on. So let's start discussing these topics one by one. Starting with topic number 1, and that is India-Russia RELOS Pact. You know, it's very simple. If Indian Navy, Indian Air Force wants to increase its global footprint, or basically its operational footprint, if it wants to operate in far-off seas, not just in oceans or areas which have some proximity to India, they want to operate in high seas, far-off regions of the globe, well, they need to have certain arrangements with different countries. So, one such arrangement is the Logistics Support Agreement. Now, what is Logistics Support Agreement? Suppose there is an Indian naval ship that is operating in the Arctic Ocean, and that naval ship requires some repair, some refueling. Where will it go? Well, no country would allow an Indian ship, a foreign country's ship on their ports, okay, fighter ship. So you need to have agreements with countries. Now, India has an agreement with Russia. Now, if Indian ship is operating in Arctic Ocean, it can call on to these Russian ports and go for refueling and repair. Right? And similarly, if Russian ships are operating in the Indian Ocean, they can use Indian ports for all these activities. This is the reciprocal arrangement. Now, this arrangement is very important if India wants to expand its operating footprint. Okay? India has similar agreements with other countries. India has one such agreement with USA also. But, well, India had this agreement with Russia, but it was not operationalized yet. Well, now it is operational. So you'll see Russian ships on Indian ports and Indian ships on Russian ports. Now, what would be the advantages of this agreement? We'll talk about everything. Okay, so let's begin. So India-Russia RELOS Pact, Reciprocal Logistics Support Agreement. Okay, now RELOS is an administrative logistics support agreement designed to simplify cross-border military support. It mirrors India's existing agreements. Okay, India has such agreements with 9 other countries like USA, France, Japan, Australia, UK, South Korea, Singapore, Vietnam, Oman. So India is slowly and gradually expanding its footprint because it is a rising superpower. Everyone knows about it. And a rising superpower should be a rising military superpower as well. And for that, you need to expand your area of operation. Your ships shouldn't only be found in the Indian Ocean. They should be found in all the other oceans of the world. This will make it possible. Okay. The operationalization of RELOS highlights India's commitment to strategic autonomy, balancing its defense architecture across major global powers. Okay, now what are the four major pillars of this RELOS? First of all, reciprocal facility access. Russian ships can use Indian ports, Indian ships can use Russian ports. Mind you, we are talking about warships. Commercial ships already can use these port facilities, but warships. Simplifies refueling and turnaround at ports. Then cashless accounting. All the trade that is happening between the two sides using ships, well, that would involve cashless accounting because already Russia is undergoing sanctions. So if there is any trade between India and Russia, it cannot happen in US dollars because, well, USA has blocked trade with Russia because of its sanctions. Okay, and the reason why America can apply those sanctions on Russia is because it controls the SWIFT banking network. You do bank payments, right? So it's because of that. Okay, then Arctic footprint. Remember, I told you that through these agreements, Indian naval presence, Indian air presence would increase, expand. Now, Indian ships would be operating in Arctic region as well. This grants India logistics gaps inside the polar circle, Arctic circle, because Russia is in that region. And pillar number 4, strategic safeguards, ban base construction or permanent deployments. Okay, both these sides have decided that Russia will not construct a base in India, India will not construct a base in Russia. Okay, this much sovereignty has been respected by both sides. Okay, so these are the 4 pillars. Now we should straight away jump to the advantages that this agreement will have for India. Okay, so policy evaluation. Number one thing is that this agreement, the operationalization of this agreement, showcases India's strategic autonomy. Because you see, American countries consider Russia, American countries, I'm sorry about this, basically Western countries, consider Russia to be their strategic rival. Now, India has these logistics agreement with the Western countries. It also has these logistics support agreements with Russia also. So it has maintained its autonomy. It has shown to the world that it can be a part of military grouping like Quad. Simultaneously, it can have military relationship with Russia as well. Quad is, well, USA, Australia and Japan and India. Okay, so this showcases our independent foreign policy and defense policy. The number 2, insulating the defense supply chain. Russia remains India's largest defense equipment supplier. RELOS smoothens the operational upkeep because there are certain ships, warships in India that are Russian supplied. Surely only Russia has the capability to repair them. This agreement would allow India's warships to be repaired by Russia at Russian ports. So this smoothens these operations. Then Western sanctions tightrope. This is something that we need to be careful of because America has threatened secondary sanctions. What are secondary sanctions? Well, they have applied sanctions on Russia. Those are primary sanctions. But if anyone else trades with Russia, America will apply similar sanctions on that country as well. These are secondary, tier 2 sanctions. So America, because of this agreement, because America considers Russia to be a strategic rival, America can threaten India with these secondary sanctions. So India has to do a very delicate balance. This is one critical point. Otherwise, there are only advantages that both countries can show, will show. All right. So this is the topic. That's all you need to know as far as this topic is concerned. And therefore, let's quickly shift our focus to next news item. And that is related to US-Iran preliminary peace accord. This was, well, everyone wanted this peace accord because the world was hurting because of this war and the blockade of Strait of Hormuz. India was really hurting. Therefore, this peace accord is a welcome step. But there are certain loopholes in this peace accord. Plus, there is this trust deficit also between America and Iran. Iran doesn't trust America, America doesn't trust Iran. And therefore, both sides are very cautious. Both sides don't believe that either of them would keep their promises in this peace accord. Iran feels that America will break some of the promises promised in this peace accord, and USA feels the same about Iran. Okay, so first let's talk about this peace accord, and then let's talk about the strategic implications and its impact on India. Okay, so let's do this. So US-Iran preliminary peace accord. On June 17th, USA and Iran officially signed 14-point preliminary memorandum of understanding, alternatively known as Islamabad Memorandum. And through this, well, Pakistan has raised its stature, okay, because it was pretty instrumental in brokering this peace deal. Brokered through months of tireless, intensive mediation by Pakistan, Qatar, and Switzerland, the accord was finalized on the sidelines of G7 summit. Now, this entire peace accord has 4 pillars. Let's talk about those 4 pillars, okay? So, rather than a final comprehensive peace treaty, it is a preliminary peace treaty. The MOU establishes a strict 60-day technical standstill and negotiation window to iron out highly contentious long-term issues. So both sides have serious long-term issues. This 60-day peace agreement is that, well, it's kind of a ceasefire, that you don't do this, you don't cross this line, we won't cross this line. And if we promise each other that we won't cross these lines, well, then we can iron out these legacy issues. Okay, so everything is not resolved. The immediate hostilities have been resolved, but other major issues like Iran's nuclear program, well, talks would go on to solve that as well. Okay, so what are the 4 core elements? Multilateral ceasefire, absolute halt to military operations across the fronts, including Lebanon, because Israel was attacking Lebanon and Iran said that, well, all hostilities should be removed. Okay, then strait reopening, complete lifting of the US naval blockade and movement of ships across the Strait of Hormuz. Immediate energy relief. US Treasury issues key waivers for Iranian crude and petroleum exports. Earlier, because of American sanctions, Iran could not export its crude oil. Now, USA has lifted those sanctions temporarily for these 60 days so that Iran can officially sell its oil to the world. And India is going to be the biggest beneficiary of this. 60-day nuclear standstill window. Okay, Iran downblends uranium under IAEA on its soil while final terms are negotiated. Iran will halt its nuclear program until a final peace accord is reached. So for these 60 days, Iran promises to stop its nuclear program. Okay, halt basically. Stop wherever it is, the enrichment of uranium. Okay, now, this is a comparison between the positions of both sides before this treaty and after this treaty. So before this treaty, America's West Asia policy was pursuit of forced regime change in Iran and complete economic isolation of Tehran. Now, well, no regime change and the economic isolation of Iran, those sanctions have been lifted. Then sanctions lever, max pressure sanctions to deny all financial liquidity to Iran. This has been waived off. Nuclear strategy demands that all highly enriched material be shipped out entirely out of Iranian territory. So earlier USA's demand was that completely dismantle your nuclear program and ship out all uranium from your country. Well, now the USA is silent on it. USA is saying that don't enrich your uranium further. Stop wherever you are until a final agreement is reached. Okay. Now, there are still risks that this agreement won't be followed by either side. What are those risks? What are the implementation gaps? Well, the sequencing of the promises. Iran believes that as soon as sanctions are lifted on Iran, Iran will stop its nuclear program. This is the view of Iran. First, remove sanctions and then we'll stop. America, on the other hand, says that first remove your nuclear program or, halt it, and then we will remove sanctions. This is a big disagreement. Let's see what happens. Then, Israel is not a signatory to this agreement. And Israel has said that we won't stop occupying the southern region of Lebanon. But Iran has said that this peace accord includes cessation of attacks on Lebanon. But Israel is not a signatory to this. So how would USA stop Israel from attacking Lebanon? We'll have to find out. And then there is trust deficit, which we talked about. Both sides don't trust each other and both sides don't trust that each side will hold its end of the bargain. Okay, so this is there. But let's just move a little away from this, the implications of this agreement, and let's talk about India. Is this a good news for India? Is this good news for India? Absolutely it is. India is going to gain a lot out of it. Strategic implications for India. Securing critical energy corridors, because now crude oil would be available. The supply would be available. Okay, Strait of Hormuz is open now. Reviving Chabahar port. India already has infrastructure investments in Iran. Because of the war, those investments were, well, blocked. Okay, or nothing was happening. Now it would open up. India was constructing Chabahar port, plus India was constructing a trade corridor, north-south trade corridor. Okay. Now, this north-south trade corridor was India's, well, way to Central Asia. India would use Iran to reach Central Asia because Pakistan has blocked that. So that would go on, international north-south transport corridor. And diaspora security. There are so many Indians living in West Asia and Iran. Their physical security was a challenge. Not anymore. They can, well, breathe a sigh of relief that at least for 60 days, nothing would happen as far as the security of their own family and their friends is concerned. Okay. So this is the thing, right? All right then. Now let's quickly shift our focus to third news item, and that is BRICS head of space meet, space agencies. So we all know that 2026 India has the chairmanship of BRICS. And under BRICS, well, there are so many summits that are happening. And these summits are being hosted by India. We've talked about Agricultural Minister Summit, some other summits, and now we are going to talk about a summit that is being attended by the heads of space agencies of all these BRICS countries. Okay. Now, in our previous international relations current affairs lectures, we have talked about BRICS countries in detail, who are the members of BRICS now, because this group was expanded. Earlier, it was only 5 countries. Now it's 11. So we have talked about this. So in today's lecture, we are only going to focus on this space summit only. Clear? So let's straight away dive into this. So BRICS heads of space agencies meet. So as part of India's 2026 BRICS chairship, the ISRO and Department of Space, with the backing of MEA, hosted landmark BRICS heads of space agencies meeting. So HOSA. Okay. The theme of this meeting was Building for Resilience, Innovation, Cooperation and Sustainability. This theme aligns with India's humanitarian, people-centric and humanity-first philosophy presented at BRICS Summit. Basically, the theme was that use space technology to serve the humanity. Okay, that was it. Now, this summit was hosted in Bengaluru, the space capital of India, because ISRO's center is there. Okay. Now, what were the core pillars of this summit? Okay, what agreement or what understanding was reached between all these 11 nations, BRICS nations, with respect to space policy? So there are 3 core pillars, 3 technical pillars of HOSA. Number 1, all these 11 countries would cooperate to go for sustainability of space operations. Okay, because space is currently suffering from this huge problem of space debris. So all these countries would focus and cooperate on removing the space debris so that, well, future space operations or missions, well, their safety would not be compromised. Okay. Then RSCC expansion, amending the 2021 remote sensing agreement to load 6 new stations imagery. This is basically remote sensing, cooperation on Earth observation satellites. Then Space Council terms of reference, finalizing institutional terms to coordinate data and tracking networks. They will create a BRICS Space Council. Okay, so it will be a space council of these 11 nations where they'll cooperate. Now, the functions or the mandate of the Space Council is known as, well, TOR, terms of reference. So this was finalized in this. Okay, what will the Space Council do? What would be the role given to each country? All of that. Now, we should focus on this part also because India was also able to showcase its private space sector in this meeting. Under India's leadership, the HOSA meet went beyond state-level space diplomacy to actively promote commercial interests of private space companies. And private space companies are on the rise. Okay, you know about SpaceX, you know about Blue Origin. All these big tech giants are investing in space companies also. Now, India also has a privatization of space policy. Okay, for example, there is an organization in India called InSpace. Its whole job is to promote private space sector. The Indian National Space Promotion and Authorization Center hosted specialized business-to-business presentations for visiting delegates. So all these space startups showcase their future missions. They were able to meet these space agencies, showcasing their talent. Indian private space startups presented their end-to-end capabilities across vital commercial verticals. Like Indian private space startups can launch satellites, manufacture satellites, and a host of other things. Industry visits, delegates participated in structural facility tours of Indian private space tech labs, paving the way for direct commercial export contracts. So this would be really beneficial for Indian space companies because Once these big space agencies of these BRICS countries, once they see Indian private space startups potential, they would give them contracts, orders. This would be a profit-making thing for them, right? Now, yeah. Well, these three areas, what was the situation and what is the problem? Okay, these two columns talk about this. So, global space governance. Well, this summit positions the Global South as an independent standard setter. But, well, all these 11 nations have different priorities. For example, this BRICS contains China and India, which are strategic rivals. How can they cooperate? Similarly, on autonomy of space data, both these countries won't cooperate, and commercial space export. Competitive friction with China's established Belt and Road Space Silk Road initiative, India has to compete with that. So this last column is basically the problems, basically the roadblocks. And this talks about the opportunity, which this cooperation is going to give, right? That's about it. Now, why is this important for India? Strategic significance of this space summit for India. Consolidating India's leadership in Global South, because BRICS is, after all, a Global South organization. Then driving private space revenues, because these space agencies might give contracts to these private space startups of India. Securing a voice in space law, because these 11 nations have decided to create international rules and regulations with respect to conduct of different space agencies in the outer space. Okay, already there is an international law, Outer Space Treaty, but it's not sufficient. So BRICS countries have now taken a lead in creating that legal architecture so that all space agencies of the world can safely explore space. Okay, so this is there. And in the end, we'll quickly talk about FAO's SOFIA 2026 report. Now, FAO is a United Nations organization, Food and Agricultural Organization, FAO. Now, its main job is food and agriculture. So it talks about all kinds of foods. Now, fisheries is an important source of food for so many people. Now, recently they came out with a report talking about the state of fisheries in the world. Now, the state of fisheries in the world, as far as the world is concerned, it has some good news, some bad news. But it has all good news for India. Okay, so what is the SOFIA report? What good news is there for India in this? And what bad news is there for the world? Let's talk about all these things very quickly. So FAO's SOFIA 2026 report. Released in mid-June at the 11th Our Ocean Conference in Mombasa, Kenya, the biennial, that means once in every 2 years. SOFIA 2026 report serves as a global benchmark for aquatic food systems. Remember this fact, this SOFIA report comes once every 2 years. They can ask an MCQ out of it. The theme was Blue Transformation. The report charts tangible progress towards shifting global aquaculture and capture fisheries into efficient, inclusive, climate-resilient value chains. It also directly supports Sustainable Development Goal number 14, life below water, and Sustainable Development Goal number 2, zero hunger, because fisheries is also a food source. Okay. Now, the global situation. Record aggregate production. Combined global fisheries and aquaculture production soared to 235 million tons. Record. For the first time in history, global aquaculture of aquatic animals surpassed 100 million tons. Capture fisheries. So what are capture fisheries? When you fish wild aquatic organisms in the deep seas, oceans and all. Now, we need to be very careful with capture fisheries. In fact, FAO basically encourages aquaculture, where you breed fishes rather than capturing them from the sea, because those fishes are limited. Okay, and there is a problem of overfishing or sustainable fishing. If you'll overfish, you'll exhaust all the fisheries resources of the world. So capture fisheries has remained at a standstill. Okay, it has stagnated. And this is good news, because that means we are becoming more sustainable. Trade paradigm. Global trade in aquatic animal products hit record highs of 184 billion. So sea trade, not sea trade, trade in aqua products has increased. All right, very good. Now let's talk about India's position. These are some of the laurels for India. India is number 1 in inland fish catches. Okay, inland fisheries production. Inland means not ocean, rivers and freshwater sources. Number 2 in aquatic animals. Number 2 in farmed fish, aquaculture. So India is number 1 or number 2 as far as fisheries production is concerned. This is good news for India's food security. Good news for India's export potential also. Okay. Now, what are the challenges? Well, already because of climate change and sea surface temperature increases, well, these fisheries of deep oceans or high seas, well, their survivability is declining, and these fisheries resources in the high seas are declining because of climate change. So this is a challenge. Then deep regional consumption disparities. Yes, fish consumption has increased in the world, but there are differences between regions. Like Asia consumes a lot of fishes, but Africa lags behind in production as well as consumption. Plus the big challenge of climate change. So these are some of the challenges. And as we all do, significance for India, because we are India centric, we are preparing for UPSC. Data in SOFIA report serves as a major endorsement of India's multi-pronged policy focus on fisheries sector. It validates India's Pradhan Mantri Matsya Sampada Yojana and its achievements. It tells us that India has a lot of potential in its seafood export. And, fisheries sector alone employs directly or indirectly 28 million people. If India's fishery sector is on the rise, well, jobs in this sector would also be on the rise. This is good news for India's livelihood situation, right? And yes, well, in your notes, there is this way forward also, that what should the world do now? Because there are some challenges. Okay, so these are the 3 points with respect to that way forward, which will come in handy for your mains examination. So do check it out as well, right? And that would be all. With that, we conclude today's session. So thank you so much for watching, everyone. And I'm sure it has added value to your preparation. But it will add more value if you'll follow these 2 things. Number 1, be consistent and regular with this lecture series. Make this lecture series a part of your daily routine. And number 2, do not forget to revise this lecture from the notes provided by us. Okay, the notes are shared on our Telegram channel, and the link to our Telegram channel is provided in the comment section below. So do download these notes from our Telegram channel and revise this lecture from the notes, because only this way you'll be able to retain these current affairs in your memory. Otherwise, you'll quickly forget them. Okay, so do the needful. All right then. With that, I shall take your leave with the promise of seeing you again with another lecture on current affairs. Thank you, everyone.